Hi, everybody. So I'm Rachel, and my friend AJ's here with me, and we are about to start a new series that we're going to be doing every month, called His Picks, Her Picks. And it is what we're going to do is we're going to pick a genre, and we're each going to pick a movie that the other hasn't seen, and have them watch it, and then we're going to talk about both films. And so it should be really fun. And we decided this time to start with a genre that AJ is much more familiar with than.
Sorry. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. We decided to pick a genre that AJ is much more familiar with than I am. And so I thought that would be kind of part of the fun of it. And so we were talking about Westerns. And so, AJ, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, hi, I'm AJ. You see, I'm a big movie fan and I'm a writer. I don't know what else to say that would be relevant to this particular video. So,
Yeah.
There you go.
Great. Okay. And so we decided to pick Westerns, and I picked I have about 4 Westerns that I've seen. And so I decided, really the only one that I think AJ hadn't seen is the classic High Noon, with Gary Cooper, and so it's going to be really fun to talk about that. And then also, then AJ picked for me. Do you want to tell us a little about the one you picked?
Oh yeah, sure. It's called The Cowboys. It's from 1972, and it stars John Wayne. And it was, I don't know, it's a very interesting John Wayne movie in many ways, very unique. And we'll get into that.
For
But
sure. Yeah, I mean, I think for a Western, we really picked 2, I think, really good examples of both kinds of type of Western story. One's like a real frontier story, with the cow wrangling, and like a cow. It's called the Cowboys. And then the other is more of like a sort of a shoot 'em up, sort of stand 'em up kind of, uh, the sheriff versus the outlaw kind of a thing. So I think it's really pretty good comparison. I think I'm glad we picked one John Wayne movie. You kind of got to have that in there.
yeah,
And
totally.
so I think it's a good 2 choices to do. And I am, if anybody, it looks like we have a viewer. If you want to join in and ask questions on the Q&A, I have it up. It looks like Tom Blakeney Reviews is on, and so welcome, Tom. And if you have any comments, please put it in the questions, the Q&A. So I will have that up. And so I think let's start by, I think the only way that really makes sense is to talk about one and then talk about the other, and then maybe compare and contrast at the end between the 2. And so let's start with High Noon. So let me get up my notes. So High Noon is a classic, probably one of the most famous Westerns, I would say, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it was made in 1952, and you guys have to excuse me a little bit. I'm still not at full voice. I still have a little bit of this bronchitis, but it was directed by a man named Fred Zinnemann.
Zinnemann, yeah.
Zinnemann, yeah, and it, of course, and it was written by a guy named Carl Foreman, and it stars, of course, Gary Cooper, Grace Kelly, and Lloyd Bridges. Those are probably the biggest names in the cast. And
sorry.
what were your overall, just sort of base thoughts about High Noon?
Well, it's kind of a hard movie to go into just cold because it is so beloved by so many people.
Sure.
It's on the AFI Top 100 American Films list and all kinds of stuff. And when I was looking at the list, like the production list, I was thinking there's a good reason why this is so beloved. Like even the producer Stanley Kramer is kind of he's a big Hollywood name,
Mm-hmm.
well known for like message movies, things like that. And
Yeah.
I guess this is kind of a message movie, but it doesn't really get in the way of the story.
No.
I like that. And it was actually kind of controversial for its message at the time, but we'll get into that, I guess.
Yeah,
But
for
but
sure.
overall, I liked it. It was a very slim story, very tight, and I like that a lot.
Yeah. Uh, it's definitely not an action adventure kind of western. It's more of a character study than anything else. And yeah, so my initial sort of thoughts on rewatching it was that I don't think it's the well, I say I think you'd see this movie possibly made today, but I think it would be a real art house kind of movie that not very many people would see. Because it's actually really simple. People complained about Mad Max just being about someone driving down one way and turning left.
Yeah,
uh, that's how kind of this is a really simple movie, and I mean it's basically about a man who Will Kane is his name, and he was the sheriff of a town and in the old west, and the as sheriff he put down a outlaw in jail, um, and by the name of Frank Miller, and Frank Miller has managed to free himself from the jail, and him and his gang are coming. They are going to get Will Kane back in revenge, and so he has just gotten married at the beginning of the movie to the Grace Kelly character named Amy, and who is a Quaker, and she wants him to leave all of this and leave all of the confrontation and dealing with all of that. And so it's kind of but he finds out that they are coming, and so he decides to go back and protect the people from this guy Frank Miller, and most of the movie is him going around and trying to get people to help him with this guy coming. And it's pretty much all it is. It's very very simple story, and I feel like now if they made it today, they would want to add in all kinds of stunts and adventure and make it something that it's just not.
yeah, definitely. I would agree with that. And because very is. I learned how to stop really well. It is very much a character-driven piece
Yes.
rather than an action-driven one, and that's kind of unique for a western. Like,
Yeah.
even like the Cowboys, the other one isn't all that character-driven, to
Right.
be honest.
Yeah.
And I think it's I think it's appropriate that there's so many great character actors in this movie.
Mm,
Like, of course, you have Gary Cooper, who's like the star of the movie, and I'm sure he's one thing that helped get the movie made.
right.
But then you also have like all these other stars like Lloyd Bridges, who is Bo and Jeff's dad, and you can really tell by looking at him in this movie. And just all the actors in the town are like these really good character actors, like Lee Van Cleef, who is also in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, is one of
Okay.
the is one of the villains, one of Frank Miller's henchmen in it. It's all these really
Okay.
good character actors, and I like that.
Yeah. I really liked what's her name? Katie Giraldo as Helen. I thought she was really good in the part as the as his former girlfriend, who's also dating the Lloyd Bridges character. I thought that she was really beautiful, and that's saying something when you're in a movie with Grace Kelly if you still come off as beautiful. And yeah, I thought it was a really really rich kind of cast, and it's just something that maybe someone like the Coen brothers or someone like that could maybe pull off today, but I think in general, it would be kind of ruined by uh, an attempt to make it more exciting if
Yeah,
it was made today. Um, So I forgot to say that this will be a spoiler filled podcast. So
Yeah.
if you haven't seen, especially the Cowboys, like it's impossible to really talk about it without talking about big spoilers. So
Yeah.
these movies are old enough that I think we're good. We should be. Um, okay, so I have a couple questions. We each came up with a few questions about our movies, and so one thing that's interesting is, do you think that Will does the right thing by going back? Because there's sort of two arguments I think that you can make. He has this, loyalty to his job and to the people that he feels like he was the one that put this guy behind bars. He's the one that has to, in the end, sort of stand up to him. But on the other hand, like he's made a commitment to his wife, his new wife, that he wouldn't do that, And so, like, what's more important, the commitment that you made to your wife, or the commitment that you made to, and it's to people who don't even really like him that much and don't really respect him that much in the town. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I don't know. It is kind of an interesting question because technically he wasn't even Marshall anymore. He
Right.
was gone, but the new Marshall wouldn't be in town until the next day. Not so conveniently, I guess. Convenient for the movie, not for him.
Right.
But I think that he made the right choice, I guess I would say, because I don't know, when you're a Marshall that long, no matter what the people think of you, you grow. If you're a good Marshall, you grow to have that sense of attachment and a sense of responsibility. And you
Yeah.
know that if there's not somebody there to pick up pick it up when you're gone, you're naturally gonna feel that that responsibility, I guess. And well, I don't know. I'm trying to put my thoughts together about Grace Kelly's character, I guess, because she has
Yeah.
a very interesting character arc, I
Yeah,
guess.
for sure.
And I don't know. I guess I don't know what your other questions are. And I think
No, go ahead.
Will Kane's way of, I don't know. It kind of clashes with the other part of the movie where he's trying to run around, not running around. That makes it sound he's going around asking for help from others. Like I understand it, but I think it's interesting when you combine it with this idea of responsibility for the town and protecting the town.
Yeah, that's true. I was gonna I actually my next question is, most of the movie Will is going around to different people looking for help. Did you find this compelling, or did you feel for the people at all? And what would you have done in if somebody had asked? Because I really like the scene where he goes to his friend, his house, and the friend it makes the wife lie that he's not home, he's at church, and after he leaves, his wife says, why did you make me do that? And he says, well, do you want to become a widow? And so it's like, it's kind of classic sort of um, self-preservation versus, I guess, not being brave and kind of doing what's right.
Yeah, definitely. And I was actually thinking about this a lot while I was watching the movie because I had read a story beforehand about Howard Hawks, who was another big director during this time. He saw High Noon and he hated the movie
Oh, really?
and, because he said, I don't think a Western sheriff should have to go around asking for help. That's why they elected him to protect them. you know,
Right.
and that's why he made Rio Bravo one of his really famous westerns in direct response to High Noon
Oh,
because
really?
it's almost the same situation. And actually, all the townspeople and all his friends offer to help the sheriff, but he turns down their help in that movie. And
Yeah.
so I was thinking about that, and I was thinking if it were me, I would probably in that situation I would probably do what Gary Cooper's character does in this movie, but I don't know.
I,
It's an
I I'm not the bravest person in the world. I don't know. I think I might have come up with an excuse. I hate to say it, but I think I probably would have been too scared to take on these. what is sort of almost practically a sure thing of it being a bad situation. Like it's not like it was sort of a maybe kind of situation, but I don't know, it's just interesting because you also have like uh, him at the church and sort of the the different rationale that the church people use to not helping is really interesting because obviously it's a church, like you expect them to do the right thing because they're a church, right? But they come up with lots of excuses.
Yeah, and it's funny how some of the excuses almost didn't have nothing to do with the situation. It was like, or they did, but it wasn't really anything that was a valid point at the time.
Yeah,
it was like if we had had more deputies, this wouldn't have happened. It was like, well, it's happening now.
Yeah, or how about when they got mad that he didn't get married in the church or something like that, because he married a Quaker, and as if that was a valid reason.
And that was one thing. That was one part of that scene that I really liked, though, was that the minister is angry initially, and then he finds out what's going on, and he's not. And like Gary Cooper explains part of the reason why they didn't get married in the church is because his wife was a Quaker, and he just explains what's going on, and the minister is able to put all his personal feelings aside, and he's able to forgive Gary Cooper, but the rest of the town is not not as ready,
Yeah. Well, and I feel like you could even sort of see this now. I feel like with law enforcement, like people are really like they're the enemy until they do something heroic, and all of a sudden they're the heroes. And you hear all this great kind of talk about it, and so in a certain way, I feel like we still have some of these same kind of situations now. It's like everybody wants to think that they would help and do the right thing and be kind of a citizen, not a citizen's arrest, but a citizen watch guard kind of a situation. But how many of us would just want to kind of pretend, oh, I didn't really see that, I didn't see that situation, I didn't see that, person beating up another person or whatever it might be, and you just pretend like you didn't see it, or you didn't know, or you couldn't help, or whatever, and you expect law enforcement to take care of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I'm still thinking about what I would do. Like, I think if it was a real world situation, I would do what Will Kane does, but ideally, I'm with Howard Hawks, and I would want to be like his sheriff, John Wayne's character in Rio Bravo,
Yeah.
Just to be the stoic guy who says, you know what, I'm not going to put you in danger. I sign on to defend you, and that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's me.
No, that's true. So did you feel the film builds tension effectively? And what did you think of the smaller characters like Helen and Harvey Pell? So that's Lloyd Bridges' character. What do you think about how it built tension?
I think it did it really well. Like, I have this big book here, this big book of interviews with, like I said, conversations with the great movie makers of Hollywood's golden age.
Oh, cool.
And one of the interviews in there happens to be with Fred Zinnemann, who directed High Noon. And he talked about how he wanted to make sure that the audience was always aware of the time in the movie, because the movie takes place in real time,
Yeah,
and they're
that's
always
true.
cutting to the clock, so you can always see how much closer noon is getting. And I think that's I think that's how the movie builds tension, personally, is like, that this is going to happen at this time. And the movie makes sure that's always hanging over you. You're always aware what time it is and how much longer Will Kane has, to assemble his posse.
Well, and also you see like the gang getting closer and closer and closer on the train.
Yeah.
And so that kind of helps sort of build tension too. They're coming, and just he gets sort of more desperate and more desperate and more desperate after things happen. And you have like the judge who leaves at the very beginning. Everybody's just sort of one after the other's kind of fleeing the situation. And so I think that's probably its biggest strength is the movie, the way it builds tension. And I think that the music really helps with that as well. I thought it was an excellent score and excellent uh I don't know, just it not being too heavy-handed like sometimes scores are. It's by somebody named Dmitry Tiomkin is the score, and I thought that was really helpful in sort of building the tension. Because I don't know, like you feel like, oh, this guy's the hero, so he's going to get out of the situation somehow, but it really doesn't feel like you don't really understand how. Like, how is he gonna? Because it just seems like things get more and more and more this bad situation, and you expect it eventually for him to be sort of a martyr, I guess. And I don't know. So I really didn't, even though it seems like it should be pretty predictable, it actually really wasn't. I didn't feel like for me.
Yeah, and I think the movie handled that really well too, because it's not your conventional sort of Western gunfight.
Yeah.
It feels more, I don't know, like modern or something like that. I don't know, but
Yeah, there's no like cheesy kind of catchphrases or the villain's not very over the top. Like he seems like a pretty normal guy, and so I think that also adds to tension. Than if he'd been really over the kind of over the top and a big baddie.
yeah, and we'll get to that in the next movie. A real baddie,
Yes,
that
that's
one.
true. Well,
But
and like you kind of see why this person Will Kane would have rubbed people the wrong way, and it's not like he's some paragon of virtue, which I always appreciate in films. When your hero is a little bit complicated, I feel like.
yeah, and it's interesting how a lot of people in the town actually like Frank Miller, the villain, better than Will
Yes.
Kane. When he goes into the saloon, he says, like the bartender says, "How dare you come in here and ask for an apology? There's a lot of friends of Frank Miller in here, you know."
Yeah.
And then the hotel owner says, "When Frank Miller was here, my hotel was always full." And so he doesn't like Gary Cooper's character either, and
Yeah.
that's really interesting.
Yeah. I think so too. What did you think about Helen and Harvey? So that's the Lloyd Bridges and the so Helen, the character, she had dated Will Kane in the past, and they had not the greatest breakup in the world. And then she had also dated Frank Miller, and she had dated, and she is was currently dating when it starts dating the Lloyd Bridges character. And I just thought she was so beautiful that you could buy that she would have attracted these three men. And I thought that, I don't know, I just thought she was interesting because she's an interesting combination of the attitude of the townspeople and also Will Kane's attitude. Like she has both sides. Like she's brave and she's strong and she wants to do the right thing, but she also is sort of a realist and practical person and is willing to get on that train as well. So I thought she was a really good character.
Yeah, I think so too. I think she's a really, really well drawn character.
Yeah.
I think that they could have integrated her into like the main story a little bit better,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
because sometimes it just feels like she's there to just add like extra dramatic tension. But it
Yeah.
doesn't really, it's not really connected like the main storyline. But I liked her like as a character. It's interesting to see her conflict between like all these different sorts of guys that she's been with, and it's just interesting. I don't know where to go with it from
Yeah.
there, but
Um yeah. What did you think about the Lloyd Bridges character Harvey?
I
Um
thought he was. Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I thought he was really interesting, and it's just how self-serving he is. Not really a bad guy, but he doesn't want to do the right thing unless it's going to benefit him,
Yeah.
you know. And it's interesting to hear what's the character's name? You just said it. The character we were
Oh,
just talking
Helen.
about, Ellen,
Yeah.
compare him to like Will Kane or even Frank Miller. Like she said that they're men and you're just a boy. You know, you haven't grown up yet. And he doesn't really stand for anything. He just wants to be the next Marshall. And that's what
Yeah.
like all his actions are based on.
Well, he wants all of the good in life and all of the prestige and everything without doing any of the work. You know, he's kind of like he's a millennial in like Western. Yeah, I thought he was really good. For again, this kind of story where you expect sort of a clear-cut hero and villain. He's somebody who's a little bit in between, which makes it interesting. And I guess last character question is, so getting into Amy, the Grace Kelly character. You know, she's this Quaker. She's kind of a Quaker convert, I think, and she, you know, wants Will to abandon his life as the sheriff and do something peaceful. And you know, I look at it now as sort of almost like a army wife kind of a thing. You know, like somebody who's like, I don't want, you know, I know you think you're doing the right thing, but you're just putting yourself in unnecessary risk for people that you don't even know that well or don't even like that much. And so I thought she was pretty good. I mean, I think that they could have maybe gotten into her sort of psyche a little bit better, because at the end, she ends up shooting one of the gang members, and I don't know if I totally bought that she would do that. That she would. I know it it works, and then it also doesn't work at the same time.
Yeah, I thought the ending was really striking, like that part of the ending, you know. Maybe that's partly because I am a really religious person, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that was really strong. I understand why she did it. I don't know. I still deciding how I feel about that, and I don't know what I would have done in her situation.
Yeah. So did you buy her character shooting the man? Do you think that was consistent with her character?
Um, I I don't know. Like I said, I'm still thinking about it. Like I can.
Because she's just about to leave. She's just about to leave Will, you know, on the train, and she has like a valid point. Like he did make this commitment to her, and he's now, you know, changing his mind all of a sudden, and so she has like I think a pretty valid point in going on the train and leaving, but she also, you know, loves her husband and wants to do the right thing, and so, but I don't know. I just felt like they could have gone a little bit more into her character and a little more into um, her decision making, you know, kind of what would lead her to that point. But I did think that it was really good, and I don't know if there was the most chemistry between her and Gary Cooper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just weird to see Grace Kelly in a western at all. To be totally honest, she doesn't really seem like she fits that world, you know.
Yeah,
Like
I agree.
like she was in a couple of Hitchcock movies where she fits the world perfectly, but that's more glamorous, you know, and she kind of has that vibe about her. So
Yeah, you think of someone like a Maureen O'Hara or somebody like that, you know, sort of more like more,
more earthy.
yeah, more
Yeah.
sort of tough.
Yeah.
Okay, so um, I just have two more questions. One is, we already kind of talked about that. My last question is, so what did you think of the ending with Will Kane throwing down the badge and leaving, and being kind of done with these people? What did you think about that?
I can see that. I can understand why he would do that. You know, it's like I guess it goes back to I wonder if that's another thing that Howard Hawks didn't like about this movie, knowing the things that he did not like. You know,
Right,
and but I understand it, and I think I might have done the same thing. I don't know because I've never been in that situation, obviously.
right.
But I think it was a strong ending, and I think it goes with the kind of the themes and the messages I think the movie is trying to put across. You know, like friends who stick with you until you're, and people who stick with you until things get tough and then they're gone. And
Yeah.
and that was really a strong. thing that Carl Foreman, the screenwriter, wanted to put in, because this was during the time of the communist blacklisting in Hollywood, and people were turning against other people and naming names so they would get off, and he kind of intended the script for High Noon to kind of reflect that, how everybody turns against Will Kane, and that was one of the things that was really controversial about the movie. So I think in terms of those themes, it's a really strong ending.
I think so too. I totally bought it. I mean, nobody cared about him. Nobody really showed him very much respect, except for the blind guy. I can't remember his name. And so he's like, I've finished. I'm finished with you guys. I've done everything I need to do. I've finished my obligation. It's sort of like finish your tour of duty and you're done. And he was certainly a lot braver than, say, the judge at the beginning.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, yeah, I think it's a really strong movie. I think it's very beautifully shot. I think it has good performances. I think it builds tension really well. And so I was glad to rewatch it. And I think I can see why it's the classic that it is. So that's kind of my questions. Did you have anything kind of else you wanted to kind of add?
I think we covered most of it, really. It just, I'm just glad I finally saw it,
Yeah.
And I guess that's it.
So, why don't you? I guess you can start now talking about the Cowboys a little bit. Some of your thoughts and questions and things, and I guess what was your we can each sort of give our base reactions to the film on our for you a rewatch, me first time watch. My response was it was definitely really surprising. It went to places I did not expect. It was a lot more violent than I would have expected, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It definitely I think that I thought it was effective, in the way that it was something caught me off guard for what I expected going into seeing it. And I thought the performances were all strong. I feel like the kids, they weren't too cutesy or Hollywoody, and yeah, overall it was a good film. I felt like, so you can kind of give your thoughts and your questions.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I'll just start by just giving like a brief synopsis of what the movie's about.
Yeah.
And like I said, the movie's a Cowboys. It was made in 1972 by Mark Rydell was the director, which is funny to think that he directed a Western, by the way, because I had the DVD with the commentary. It sounds like an old mafia guy. He has like this really thick Brooklyn accent. Yeah. So, but anyway.
That's funny.
And John Wayne is this rancher, Will Anderson, and he has this huge, like this humongous herd of cattle. And he needs to get them to Belfouche, which is this town 400 miles away, before winter comes on, basically. And at the beginning of the movie, it's spring. It's like late spring. But all his cowhands abandon him, like right before the cattle dry, because there's this gold fever has struck this town. And so they're going to try and get in on it. And so Will Anderson's friend, this guy who lives in town, is played by Slim Pickens. I love that name. But anyway, he convinces Will to use schoolboys as his cowhands on this cattle drive, like from all about 11 or like 10 to 12 years old, or 10 to 15, I would say.
Yeah.
And so they go on this cattle drive, and there's this other guy, Bruce Dern's character, who gives a name, Asa Watts, but I'm not sure that's his real name. I think he might have just gotten it out of the book, and he talks about that. He takes names out of this Cattlemen's Association book.
Oh, yeah.
And so like a lot of the credits just call him Longhair. That's his character's name. and his huge feeling gang is following them to steal the herd. So.
Well, and he starts out, he's bitter against Will because he wouldn't hire him because he can't get a job because he's a He's like on parole, basically. And so he lies at first to Will about his past. And so Will says, I'm not going to hire you because you lied to me. And so he's very resentful of that.
Yeah. And I guess that's basically it. Oh, and there's this Chuck Wagon character played by like Roscoe Lee Brown, Jebediah Nightwinger, who I love his character, and we'll get into it
Yeah,
into it later, like his connection to the story. but yeah, he's great also.
Yeah, he was really funny, and he's African American character, which I thought was interesting. Kind of added a different layer to the story than you might otherwise have gotten.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess my initial reaction to it when I first saw it and watching it again, I didn't actually finish watching it before we started rewatching it before, but I can remember it because I've seen it so many times. It has a very epic scope to it, I think, and that's what I like about it. Like, it takes place over a long period of time. Like I said, the movie begins in late spring, and by the end of the movie, it's like almost winter. And like they mentioned that a couple of times. So it's like, wow, how long did this cattle drive take?
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, and just the scenery and the huge herd and everything just seems really big in this movie, and I guess that's what I like about it. It's very different from High Noon in that way.
Yes, very, very different. This is a lot more classic of a Western. I mean, you have, of course, you have John Wayne, but also I think that I don't know, it just has enough things to surprise you that I think it keeps it from being too predictable.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, it's not predictable hardly at all, really. At least I felt like I was really surprised by some of the things that happened.
Yeah.
So
I guess I'll go into my questions, which I stupidly did not write down, but I can remember what I wanted to ask. So the first question I have, I guess, is like kind of the main thing that this movie hinges on is the fact that these aren't like grown men who are on this cattle drive. These are mostly boys, except for John Wayne and Roscoe Lee Brown. And I guess, how did the fact that these were all like preteens, tweens, and teenagers, how did that change the way you looked at the movie? How did it change the story for you?
Well, I felt like it was sort of Lord of the Flies in the Old West.
Yeah,
a little bit. He's sort of this. I think everything feels more violent because it's with kids. Like when the kid gets threatened the very first time by the Bruce Dern character, like that's so much scarier because it's a little boy than it would be if it was a man. Just sort of the sense of fear, that fear for these boys is also, and you also have like a certain degree of sort of fun that you would never get with grown-up characters, like when they end up drinking, that scene is kind of fun. And you get also sort of the bond between the John Wayne character and the boys, which obviously you're not going to have that with grown men. So it has sort of adds a lot of these dimensions, I think, that make it more impactful than it might otherwise be, because you're dealing with children. It just makes it more intense.
Yeah, definitely. And like when you were talking about that, I was thinking of the other scene where one of the boys actually does die on the cattle drive.
Yes.
This is one of the big spoilers where he dies, and not really a stampede, but kind of the same thing. Like, it has the same effect.
Yeah.
This boy rides down into the herd of cows, and they get spooked, and he falls off his horse and gets trampled to death. And I think that scene is even more strong, like you said, because it is a boy who's hardly even started his life yet,
Yeah. Well, and the movie doesn't, I feel like if this movie was made today, unless it was a Tarantino or somebody who can take like a ton of risk, I feel like you would never see some of the choices made today that are made in here. Like I feel like they just wouldn't have the guts, most people, to sort of go all the way. Like he wouldn't have died. that character. Like the John Wayne character might have died, but I feel like everything would be sort of softened in most if they were doing adaptation today.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the things I like about the movie, that they didn't sugarcoat the kids either. Like there's
No,
this one scene like where they're trying to act like men. They're trying to act older than they are in a lot of the early scenes anyway.
sure,
And there's that scene where the kid swears at John Wayne, like
yeah,
on purpose. Like where he's getting him to swear because he wants him to stop stuttering, basically. But it's very reminiscent of the King's Speech in a way. That's where they got it. I don't know.
I thought about that too, actually. King's Speech,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, it's certain, like, yeah, that would not. There's no way they would have somebody be that harsh to a kid in a movie today. I just think there's so many moments like that would be sort of softened and wouldn't be as sort of shocking, and I don't think as good if they were done today.
Yeah. And I guess kind of as an outgrowth of that question, I have a lot of questions about specific characters. What did you
Yeah.
think of Cimarron, the one kid who didn't grow up in the school? The Indian
Oh
kid.
yeah.
Like, what did you think?
I
Because he's very different from the other boys. So sorry, I didn't mean to
yes.
interrupt you.
No, you're fine. I thought that he was fine. He's kind of an archetype, I guess, of a sort of the stalwart Indian kind of character.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he didn't. I felt like all the boys were pretty good. Like it wasn't like a like say Newsies or these kinds of movies, where you have like the Mighty Ducks or sort of these troops of boys that you usually have one character who's the fatty, one character who's the dope, one character who's the who's sort of the grump. I guess you have your seven dwarfs kind of characters, and this I felt like they were better than that.
Yeah. And in a way, like I know this is a movie with troops of kids, but just talking right now, like I was thinking about the way the kids interact with each other. It reminded me of a lot of Stand By Me in a way. Like
Oh,
it felt
that's a good
very
one.
honest and very realistic in the way that the kids interact with each other and the kind of things they talk about.
Yeah, I
All
think
those
so too.
yeah.
It didn't feel like kids kind of trying to. It felt like these are kids trying to be adults, but they still felt like it felt like that was authentic to what kids would really be doing in that situation. Like a kid would be trying to be, especially with John Wayne's character, like not letting him stutter and kind of watching what they eat and stuff like that. Like him and him working them so hard. Like the scene where the character falls asleep on the horse
Oh
and
yeah.
the John Wayne character has no sympathy for him at all. Like he doesn't treat them any different than he would adults. He's like,
Yeah.
I'm paying for a full day's wage. You better stay awake.
Yeah, definitely.
Which was pretty interesting.
And I think that they handled the Duke's interaction with the boys really well. Like you could see how he grows fond of them. I like how it was like very subtle in the way that he interacts with the boys starts to change a little bit. He starts to open up a little bit more
Yeah.
to them. Like the scene where I don't know how to talk about this in a way on a family-friendly podcast where they're talking about when they're at the carnival where they see that one woman.
Oh yeah.
And then Duke comes up and says, "I saw my first woman there too, probably the same one."
Yeah.
It's like, and that's not something he would have said to the boys earlier on the drive. He wanted to mention that to them.
Yeah. Who was that? Is that that woman? That was sort of weird because it was just like I feel like it was a pretty big name.
Oh, Colleen Dewhurst. That's later on in the movie because John Wayne isn't there during that scene when they come across the wagon. No.
Yeah, that was weird. That felt really. And I guess maybe I'm just too attached to her from Anna Green Gables, the actress.
Yeah.
But it was like, this is really weird. All of a sudden, have this like prostitute.
Where she's kind of a madam in this movie.
Yeah. And I don't know, like it just felt sort of out of the blue to me having her, and then you never really hear about her again.
I wonder if that's something that they did because of the fact that they had boys in it. Because if it had been a movie with like grown men, that seemed wouldn't have been like wouldn't have been like a big deal at all, you know?
Yeah.
It's
But
like,
I don't know. It just felt out of place to me a little bit. But
yeah. And speaking of characters who were in that scene, because I don't think John Wayne was there. I think he had ridden ahead during that scene, so he wasn't there. What did you think of Roscoe Lee Brown's character, Jebediah Nightwinger, like how he tied into the story? Do you think he served, or what do you think of him overall? And do you think he served a real useful purpose in the story, or do you think he was just there to add like color? Not. That was kind of the
yeah.
wrong word.
No, I mean, he was good. I think that he could have been such a cliche, just the comic relief, sort of the bumbling sidekick kind of a thing, or he could have been sort of there's the trope called the mystical Negro, who's like who it's a black person, like in Song of the South or Beasts of the Southern Wild, or sort of these movies where the African American character is sort of the one with all the wisdom and the you know, sort of the stories and the tales, and come here our sort of better way of life. And I feel like he could have been that character, but I don't think he was. I think that
Yeah.
he was more of a realist than that, and I think he was happy, but he wasn't so in an annoying way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like in a way, like the first time I saw this movie, wasn't sure whether to trust him or not. He has a
Yeah.
very he has a very interesting vibe about his character, you know. And he's not any more warm towards well, he is a little bit more warm towards the boys than John Wayne, but not like super super warm, you know.
No. I mean, because they still have to tie him up or because otherwise he wouldn't have gone along with their plan. Like, it's not like he's sort of in line with the boys. Excuse me. Yeah, I thought he was good. I thought he was a good, overall character. I think that if I was gonna, I think I was fine with all the characters. I mean, the Bruce Dern character was definitely very, just like the minute he first spoke, he's bad. He's bad. There's not a doubt. There's no sort of layers to his character, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. I don't have a problem with that, with bad guys and good guys, and I don't need every character in my movie to be nuanced. But I did think that I don't know, like, because the other characters are sort of more nuanced, that maybe they could have done a little bit more with his character and kind of his motivations. But I thought he was fine. I thought he was a fine villain.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention a couple more things about Roscoe Lee Brown.
Oh
I love
yeah,
his voice, for one thing. He's almost like James Earl Jones before. Like he has that very deep voice, but it's more, I guess, resonant than James Earl Jones in a way, you know.
yeah,
And I love his very poetic style of speaking. Like the character is very poetic style of speaking. Like when he's telling the boys about his ancestry, that first night in the bunkhouse, where he talks about how his father stormed this castle, you know, so that he and his wife could have a place to stay, you know, and stuff
yeah.
like that. Like the screenwriters did a really good job of giving him like this very poetic kind of dialogue, you
I
know.
think, yeah, without him making him into this like trope, like I said, with Song of the South, or sort of this like, wise black man telling stories, sort of thing. He didn't fall into that to me. I felt like he was
Yeah,
better than that.
I would agree with that too. And I guess you kind of already started talking about my next question. I was going to ask about Bruce Dern's character, if you thought he was, I don't know, because he really is a very nasty, nasty person in this movie, even more so than villains in other westerns, you know. And I was
Yeah.
going to ask you if you thought he went too far with that, or if he, but I guess you already answered
Well, I
that
mean,
in a way.
he is all bad, and I think it's just made more so by the fact that it's children. Like, it takes a special kind of evil to like threaten a child, and to like, that makes him especially bad.
Yeah, and there's that one scene I always think of when I think of Bruce Dern's character when you first, because like you see him kind of towards the beginning of the movie, and then you don't see him for like a really long time. But about another 40 minutes or so. You don't see him again. There's other
Yeah.
stuff going on, and then all of a sudden, right at the midpoint of the movie, he shows up again, and he has a very, very scary monologue there, where he grabs one of the boys and he says, "Now you're not going to go back to Will Anderson and say that there's a really bad men that follow this, because if you do, I'm going to come. I'm going to come to you one night and slit your throat." Basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, very, very, very scary. That was. I mean, it was intimidating. And like I said, I was surprised they pushed it that far. I really, really was.
Yeah, and but I guess it had to be really nasty for the ending. Not the ending, but that one of the big climactic scenes, I guess, to really work. The scene where spoiler alert, he kills John Wayne.
Yeah.
In this scene, and I guess that's my next question. I guess, what did you think of that scene? Because this is one of I think maybe 4 or 5 movies where John Wayne actually dies. Is actually killed. So do you think that scene was stronger because it was John Wayne, and what do you think of the way that Bruce Dern killed him?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. How does he kill him again? I forget. Does he
Huge fist fight for the first part of the scene.
Yeah.
And John Wayne turns around to walk back to the boys because he thinks it's over because Bruce Dern doesn't have his gun on it.
Oh.
But then Bruce Dern grabs the gun out of the holster and he shoots John Wayne 4 or 5 times in the back as he's walking away.
That's right. Yeah, so. I thought it was good. I mean, it is. I think made more sort of striking by the fact it's John Wayne, like you're saying. You expect him to kind of get out of the situation, and you still have a lot of the movie left at that point, so it's sort of it's extra surprising in that way. And so yeah, I think it's effective.
Yeah, and I don't know. I like the way that they shot it too, because like you said, I think it's partly because it's John Wayne. You don't expect him to die. Because I think up at that point, I think the last time he had died in a movie was 1949. Before that, it's 1972, and it's I don't know.
Well,
I think the way.
In a way, you can kind of predict it because he's such a sort of a sage character, and he's such. I don't know, in a way, you either expect him to. I don't know. I just feel like you kind of expect him to have to sacrifice sort of in the end for the boys, but I didn't expect it as soon as we got it in the story, and I definitely thought that it's still, because it's John Wayne, it definitely has an impact for sure.
Yeah, and there was a lot of controversy about that scene when it first came out, because people were like, "That's such an awful way for John Wayne to die." Such a cowardly way for him to be killed, being shot in the back. And and I guess John Wayne, kind of a funny story. John Wayne and Bruce Dern had made a lot of movies together up to this point. Mm-hmm. And Bruce Dern had been killed by John Wayne in all these movies up until this one. So kind of a reverse. But anyway, John Wayne and Bruce Dern were talking before they shot the scene, and Duke said to Bruce Dern, America's gonna hate you for doing this. And Bruce Dern said, "Yeah, but they'll love me in Berkeley, in California."
That's really funny.
And Duke laughs, since Berkeley, of course, is a highly liberal university.
Right,
and
yeah.
John Wayne is very known for being very conservative. But I guess Bruce Dern did receive death threats after this movie came out because he had killed John Wayne in this movie.
Gosh. Well, I mean, I was thinking about it, who is today's John Wayne? And I don't think we really have anybody anymore who is so, I don't know, just a movie star like that. You have your Tom Cruises and you have your Tom Hanks and things like that, but it's no John Wayne.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's neat how, especially nowadays, how John Wayne, everybody loves John Wayne, regardless of what political affiliation they are. Even these real liberal critics, they talk about this time when they met John Wayne and they were so amazed by him, by meeting this icon,
Yeah, I mean, you just had movie stars back in this era, I mean, you had I mean, 72 was later, but I don't know, just your Cary Grants and your Audrey Hepburns and just these people who were just so commanding and so big, and I feel like now, in a way, it is kind of a good thing in a way, because I think that it forces writers to kind of have to try a little harder sometimes, I think, because you can't just rely on sort of the movie star to sell your film anymore. I mean, even a movie like your George Clooney's and your Brad Pitts and stuff, they still have their involvement in a project is by no means a promise that it will be successful. And I don't know, I just can't think of anybody else that's like, I when I think of them, I immediately think of Hero, who's the and I don't know, there's no comparison, I don't think, between anyone and John Wayne, and probably never will be, for sure. And I thought that he was actually pretty like grizzled and tough for his character. Like, they could have made him softer. Like you said, he's slapping the kids, and he's I think that's another thing they would have sort of tempered a lot, is made him just a nicer guy than they did in this film.
Yeah.
If they made it now, they wouldn't have the guts.
And I wonder if nowadays they could have even gotten away with anything like that. Like, even like, I think the fact that it was John Wayne helped them get away with that even then.
Yeah.
And
I think so.
But this was kind of the beginning of an era for John Wayne in a way. Like, I think his movies got more nuanced as he got older. Like, his last movie, The Shootist, is all about death in a way, because he was very aware of his mortality toward the end of his life and started making movies that were more about that.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Was this before or after he made True Grit?
This was after. This was a few years after.
Okay.
So I guess really that was the beginning of his transformation, I guess. Because like up until then, he's very much this He-Man, Superman, Western figure in most of his movies,
Yeah.
And in this movie, he is kind of that way in a way, but with True Grit on, he kind of becomes more human in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like, especially in True Grit, I think, because you wouldn't have seen him play a character like that, like even like a couple of years before. Where he's fat and he's got his eye patch and he's really kind of rough around the edges in a lot of ways.
Yeah. But I don't feel like, I mean, I guess just because this movie like commits and goes all the way and has that, I still feel like it's unpredictable. Like, those kind of characters and those kind of things could be so predictable, but because this has some real guts to it, I don't think it is.
Yeah. And I guess that leads into the last question I wanted to ask, like, the ending of this movie, because like you said, there's a long time between when John Wayne dies and the end of the movie. At the end of the movie, the boys take back the herd at the end by picking off the members of the gang, like, one by one, and make these really creative, I guess, sort of ways. And the critics didn't like that at the time. Like, there are a couple critics, like big name critics. Oh, and sorry if you mentioned this before, my internet cut out briefly for a second.
Okay.
Like, a couple of critics, there's like Pauline Kael for the New Yorker, which is a critic I personally don't like all that much, but a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And there was Jay Cox over at Time. He said that they felt that the movie was saying that for a boy to become a man, you had to kill somebody. They thought that's what the ending was. The message the ending was getting across. What did you think of the ending? Did you think it was controversial, or?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like it was controversial for sure. I mean, I felt like I said, I was shocked at how violent it was and how graphic. Like, they don't just sort of shoot people like from a far distance. Like, there's some graphic kind of violence, and I was surprised that it went that far. And I can see what they're saying. I really can. I think it's certainly a valid interpretation of the events of the film. But I guess I was just kind of glad that it had sort of the guts to do that, as opposed to just sort of a trite, sentimental kind of ending that they could have done. To me, that made it stronger, I thought. And So, uh, yeah, I mean, I feel like they kind of had to in a way, because it wouldn't have been believable if the boys had just sort of had it easy going at the end, and gone and delivered the cattle. I feel like it needed to be sort of that intense for it to not feel silly and cheesy.
Yeah, I could see that. Personally, I disagree with both those critics in particular. Those are the only ones I could find, because there's a scene right before Bruce Dern kills John Wayne where he's talking to one of the boys, the one he threatened earlier, and said, before I was your age, I had already killed a man, and so, and they're definitely not portraying Bruce Dern as like this awesome guy, you know,
Right.
is like this real man. So I don't think they're saying that killing somebody is a sign of manhood, because if they did, I don't think Bruce Dern's character would have brought that up, or maybe he would have, but
No.
it's not painted in a positive light when he says that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it makes sense given the story. I mean, you have to have kind of be willing to have the characters uh, other go that far. I feel like otherwise it would feel really contrite. But I mean, I feel like it is a valid interpretation to think that. But I felt like I was glad that they went that far, even if it was painful to watch.
Yeah. And I gotta say, one of my favorite scenes, it doesn't involve the boys, but it comes during this whole climactic sequence when Bruce Dern and the gang get a hold of Jebediah Nightlinger, Roscoe Lee Brown's character, and they're gonna hang him. I love Roscoe Lee Brown's last prayer. That scene, his last prayer, quote unquote, where he's talking
Yeah.
about, please forgive me for all the people I have wronged and all these things. And at the end, I love his line at the end. Please forgive me for the lives I have taken and for those I am about to. I love that
Yeah, I
line.
mean that is something you never could get away with now, is having a black man about to get hanged like that. Like, unless you're doing like a 12 years a slave kind of a thing, like
Yeah,
no way, no way could you do it.
yeah,
Um,
definitely. And it's
and
like,
I also think now they would probably feel some degree of pressure to have a couple of the boys be girls.
yeah, definitely. I can see that too. And I just thought back to that scene where he first tells the boys that he's going to take them on. And the school teacher is there, and there's all those little girls there. I'd like to talk to the boys if I can. And she's like, well, and the school teacher's like, would you like to address the young ladies as well? And Dude's like, no, I got nothing to say to the young ladies. you know?
Yeah.
It's like, I wonder if they would have had that line there if it was made today.
Oh no
you know?
way. Like it would be really PC. I think there's only a few directors who could possibly get away with some of the non-PC things that are in the film. Like a Tarantino, or somebody like that. Even though I haven't seen his movies, I know that like Django Unchained had like really pretty like bold, stuff. And so I feel like he's the only one, or one of the only ones I can think of, who could get away with some of the things, some of the non-PC, which makes sense given the story. I think it works, but I just don't think they do it. It would be such a sort of an outcry.
Yeah, definitely. I
Um,
think,
so
yeah.
is this your favorite John Wayne movie?
No, actually, this is just the first one that came to mind, that popped into my head. But my favorite John Wayne movie is actually probably my favorite Western when I think about it. It's called The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. It came out in
Okay.
1962. I don't know if you've seen that one.
Uh
Have
huh.
you? Oh, you have seen that?
I haven't. I've heard about it. Jimmy Stewart, right?
Yeah, it's very much an end of the West kind of Western. It's like it's very much about the combination between like the clash between like Western law, which is like very confrontational, kill or be killed, eye for an eye, and like the kind of law we have now, because Jimmy Stewart is like a modern day, is like a lawyer who's gone to law school,
Mm.
and there's John Wayne who's like this good guy who is very much the Western figure, you know. And
Yeah.
there's Lee Marvin, who's very much like Bruce Dern is in this movie in a lot of ways. Who's
Yeah.
kind
I
of
I think my favorite John Wayne movie, I've only seen a few of his westerns. Well, I've really only seen two now. I've seen Cowboys and The Searchers, which is probably my favorite of his. It's a really good movie. But it just is so beautiful. I think that this movie is fine in that way, but it's not one that's like a work of art, if that makes sense. It's
Yeah.
not one that I'm like, wow, that was so beautiful. But but also I think The Quiet Man is probably my favorite. It's really good. It's totally different than other stuff that he did, but I love him and Maureen O'Hara are so good in that, and I think it's funny, it's intense, it's romantic. It's got probably one of the best kisses in all the movies.
It's my grandma's all-time favorite movie, or it was. Yeah.
It's it's another one that sort of breaks some PC rules that you wouldn't see now, but for comedic effect. But I like it. I think it's a good film. Watch it every
Yeah.
St. Patrick's Day.
I think it's interesting how all our favorite John Wayne movies were all directed by the same guy. They're all directed by John Ford.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's interesting to see how the visual style is different, especially between The Searchers and The Man Who Shot Liberty Balance. Because The Searchers is very widescreen and Technicolor, and it's shot in Monument Valley.
Oh, it's so
and
pretty.
And The Man Who Shot Liberty Balance is black and white. It was shot entirely on sound stages, I think. It's a very, very much a smaller kind of movie.
Yeah.
And which fits the theme of the movie, even though The Searchers is really dark, and John Wayne's character is really dark in that movie. But I don't know.
Well, cool.
Sorry. One more John Wayne. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you have any more questions?
No more questions about the Cowboys. I guess before we get off the subject of John Wayne, I wanted to mention one more of my favorite John Wayne movies, one that's not directed by John Ford. And that's his last movie, The Shootist, that I mentioned earlier.
I've never heard of that.
Which is directed by Don Siegel. It's another kind of Western where, very much like High Noon, there's not a lot of action in it. There is some, but not a lot. But John Wayne plays this gunfighter who realizes he learns that he's dying of cancer. And it's very much about his coping with his impending death, basically. And trying to decide if he wants to just die of cancer or if he wants to die with his boots on, basically. And Ron Howard's in it, and Lauren Bacall, and James Stewart, and all these other people.
That sounds good. I never even heard of it before.
Yeah. So
that's really good.
So is High Noon your favorite Western? The one that you've seen?
Well, that or The Searchers, I think, are the two best.
Yeah.
I must say I have a weakness for City Slickers too. If you're going the comedy route.
Oh yeah, definitely. I love that movie.
That one's pretty funny, and I even have fun with. This shows how few westerns I've really seen. But I even have fun with Back to the Future Part 3.
Oh yeah.
Kind of making fun of some of those tropes and stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think comedy Western wise what I like most. I guess you can't let that pass without mentioning Blazing Saddles, which is like the original comedy Western. I guess not the original one, but it's probably the most famous one.
Definitely. And that one has a little too much potty humor for my taste, but it's a classic for sure.
Yeah.
And what other? I mean, I'm not a big fan of it, but there's Rango. Sort of the animated, and Puss in Boots are kind of animated westerns.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I don't know. I haven't seen very many. So that's what was fun about sort of this project is is catching up on rewatching High Noon and catching up on the Cowboys. So I think it was a lot of fun. Where would you I guess rank High Noon? Was that I don't know. Or since you really love the genre,
I'd probably give it 4.5. I guess 4.5. It was really good. Like I said, Man Who Shot Liberty Valance is still my favorite Western,
Yeah.
but this is very high up there.
Oh, okay.
So I guess, yeah. Where
Um,
would you rank the Cowboys?
I think I would give. I think I would give the Cowboys probably 4 out of 5.
That's fair.
I mean, just because there were a few parts that sort of could have been a little tighter. It's like, okay, come on, move it a little bit, faster, kind of going. And also, I felt like I felt like that the calling the prostitute scene was sort of weird.
Yeah.
So that it looks like we're almost done. We just got a new viewer. We've had 3 viewers. Mark just joined in, and we had Tom so thank you. And so next month we are going to be doing, since this was one of AJ's favorite genres, next month we're going to do one of my favorite genres, and we are doing romantic comedies. And yeah, it's tough to find a romantic comedy I have not seen. I've seen a lot, and I feel like the genre is sort of kind of like westerns. I think is a little bit maligned, and particularly, I mean, like with westerns, you had like the Lone Ranger and just some not very good ones lately. But and you certainly have that with romantic comedies. It's been so long since there was a really great romantic comedy, and I think that there's a lot of movies that are called romantic comedies that are not romantic comedies. Like you have something like Sleepless in Seattle, which is not a comedy. It has a few comedic moments, but it's a drama. It's about this man losing his wife, and and like dealing with his grief, and it's not a comedy. I love it, but anyway.
Should we tease the movies that we're gonna see? Because I kind of like that it's a theme within a theme, because they're both made by the same director.
Yeah, I know, it's so funny out of all that. So I picked for AJ. We are going to be doing one of my favorite movies of all time, from my favorite writer, Nora Ephron. She wrote the screenplay for When Harry Met Sally. And so we're going to have so much fun talking about that. Meg Ryan, Billy Crystal, and it's going to be good.
Yeah. And I chose for Rachel The Sure Thing, which is a movie that Rob Reiner made a few years ago, a few years before, in 1985. And he called it kind of the teen movie version of It Happened One Night.
Okay, yeah.
So that it is really, really good. And this is when Rob Reiner was really on fire in the 80s. Like every movie he was making was great.
So that'll be fun. And I mean, I love Say Anything, so I'm excited to see John Cusack from that era in another role. That'll be really fun.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you guys want to watch both these movies, so you're ready for next month, that will be really fun. And so I'm excited. I think it's going to be a neat month. And if you have suggestions for genres you'd like us to cover, then let us know in the comment section. I particularly kind of want to stay away from animation because it's not really a genre, first of all, and second of all, it's just, I feel like I cover that so much on my channel in other places. So
definitely, and partly because, not to sound bragging, but this is I was the one who proposed it to Rachel. I know I'm awesome, but one of my big inspirations was the Animation Addicts podcast.
Yeah.
And kind of out of respect to Morgan, Mason, and Chelsea over there, I kind of want to stay away from animation as well.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. So okay. So AJ, where can people find you? Go ahead.
Well, speaking of Vertoscopers, I write on their website. And then I also write on my blog, Listhalanius21 at blogspot.com. And
I'll have that link in the description section, and I also linked to your Twitter.
Yeah, and then thank you for linking to that, so I don't have to spell it for people.
Yeah,
So.
and Mark just asked, are we talking about the Magnificent Seven remake?
I
Do you have
guess
any?
we could really quick.
Really quick. Did you have any thoughts on that? I really haven't heard that much about it. I don't really know.
I've seen the trailer for it. I think it looks really good. Like, it's very unique. Like, I think it's an interesting trend that these trailers are doing, like Western trailers, like Tarantino did it with Django Unchained, where they have like this modern music in these trailers, like these Westerns that aren't comedies, you know.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know, it's just an interesting trend, but I think it looks really good, and I think the cast is really interesting, especially Denzel Washington in like the lead role.
Yeah.
I think that looks really.
Is he doing the Yul Brynner part?
Yeah, and he's even dressed all in black like Yul Brynner was. So.
Well, I haven't seen the original, but I've certainly I want to, and I probably will before I see the remake. So, yeah. I mean, I don't really have a whole lot to say on that one, but.
And speaking of,
did Grit, and that, a lot of people love that. So
yeah.
Okay, so so next month we're have fun watching your romantic comedies. It's kind of perfect for June because it's a month of weddings and things.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for doing this with me. I appreciate it, and it was a good little dip into westerns for me because like I said, I'm very unfamiliar with the genre, so it was fun.
Definitely. Thank you for doing this with me.
And so thanks for our viewers, and put in the comment section if you have any other sort of questions or comments about either of these films or about westerns in general, whether you like the genre or don't like the genre. And I just feel like most of the time I'm resistant to westerns just because I feel like they are really, really predictable. But in both of these cases, I think that they do a really good job with the genre. So I think any genre can be really good if it is written well and has interesting characters. And so, all right. Well, thanks so much, and we will we'll talk again next month.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.